Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to get this party started. Welcome to the Columbus Realtors Membership Headquarters. The session that you're in this morning is the appraisal form. We're in this together, so hopefully we're all in the right place. And this is 2 hours of CE this morning. My name is Buffy Patterson. I'm with Eden Regento Real Estate Consultants, and I am the 2014 chair for the Residential Education Committee. So we all want to welcome you. Just a quick couple of housekeeping items. If you have not been in the building before, right down this hallway to your left are the men's and women's restrooms. And because this is just a 2-hour CE, there will not be any formal breaks this morning, but obviously we're all adults. If you need to handle your business, just handle your business. And just make sure you get back in here so you don't miss anything. And this class will end promptly at 11 o'clock this morning. And according to the rules and regulations of the Ohio Division of Real Estate, no one can leave before the end of class, except for, obviously, the restroom breaks. Everyone should have received a continuing education form. I'm going to hold it up. Looks like this. If you do not have this form, I would ask that you just step outside of the room quickly and pick that form up. The form is actually a 3-part form. The first part will be an evaluation of this session. The second part just asks some questions about some things that you would like to see in the future. And I would ask that you do complete that part because the Residential Education Committee does actually look at that information. That's how we ended up here today. Appraisal came up as one of the number one topics that people were interested in learning more about. And then the final part of the form, the third part, is what will actually allow you to get your CE certificate today when you leave the room. Speaking of which, when you leave the room today, you need to hand in this form in its entirety. You can do that at either door. Karen and Lucy will be collecting those, and then your CE certificates will be available immediately following the class. If you have a cell phone, and obviously with the business we're in, I know we all do, please make sure you've got it either turned off or on vibrate so that we don't interrupt. And if you are unable to hear, this room has a tendency also to get too hot or too cold. I'll be in the back corner. If you need something, just let me know and I'll make sure that you guys are taken care of. I am actually not going to introduce our panel today. I'm going to introduce our moderator, our esteemed moderator, Janine Hooks, and she's actually a member of the Residential Education Committee, and she was the chairperson for the task force that put this forum together and worked with this wonderful group of men that you see here today. So Janine she works with Fisher Homes. She's done that for about a year now. Before that, she was with Village Communities, and she's also done new home sales in Houston, Texas. But she is a native of Columbus. You'll see that she's very astute. She has held various leadership roles. She's been in the educational field, in the leadership field, in the management field, and she's going to keep us under control today. So without further ado, Janine Hooks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that, Buffy. And I'm not actually going to crack the whip quite like that. But as your moderator today, my role is to keep us on time. I try to be efficient with that and respectful of the investment that you're making with us this morning. So welcome. This is going to be a fantastic learning opportunity. I thank you so very much for coming and being prompt and on time. I also thank you for coming to this session with an open mind. I know this is a hot topic because I read the evaluations from other classes. So the fact that you're here, the fact that we have something to present to you is encouraging. I know that we all have left our biases and our egos at the front door because we're here to do what? To learn something new together. And hopefully you'll have a takeaway as a result of kind of the conversation that we're going to have this morning. So thank you in advance. I also want to thank the Residential Education Committee for listening to what you've been sharing with us on the evaluation forms. So many times I've been a part of groups where you don't necessarily feel like we're being proactive or doing something with the information that you're sharing with us. So under the leadership of Buffy Patterson, we've been able to really dig in and make something happen. So that's another reason why this is exciting. I also want to thank the Appraisal Committee for being the willing subject matter today and sitting in front of us and sharing with us their wealth and breadth of knowledge. So this is not an easy thing to do. So you guys are very comfortable in your seats with your tea and your pens and papers, but we're all on pins and needles here. So please respect the fact that they've made a huge contribution in bringing this program forward today. I also want to thank Lucy Buzzy and the administration team for making sure that things are flowing smoothly for us, that we have the right setup, the right room, what have you. So many times the people that support us and behind the scenes are not acknowledged. So I just want to say thank you for all of that. All right, so that sounds like a pretty good start off and opening. Buffy's done a fantastic job at introducing myself. Again, my name is Janine Hooks with Fisher Homes. I'm located in the northeast areas of Columbus, so I'm servicing in Powell and in Delaware. So if you happen to have some business to take care of in that direction and you're looking for a new build, please look me up. I'd be happy to offer some assistance to you. I'm going to walk you through the agenda so that we have a clear understanding of what to expect this morning. We're going to introduce our panel so you understand the expertise that will be speaking to you this morning. We've also have a list of kind of things that we want to set up so you understand exactly the environment that we're working with in terms of the credentialing of the appraiser. So we're going to talk about what does it take to become an appraiser. We're going to talk about what process and procedures are they held to. And then we're going to also talk about best practices. So what's a good way, something that I can take away in terms of interacting with my appraiser on any given situation. And then we have a series of Q&A. So we have some questions that we pulled from evaluations that we formatted here. These guys are going to do their very best to answer them and give you a lot of good information. And then we'll open the floor up so that if we haven't uncover something that's on your mind or you want to dig in a little deeper to something, we'll have the opportunity to do that as well. So that will be the process that we will follow for the next hour and 45 minutes or so. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panelists. At least I'll get it started, and we'll start off with Mr. Thomas L. Francis Jr. He is the Vice President and Branch Manager of Real Property Analyst, and he is also the Chairperson of the Appraiser Committee. So Tom, I'm going to let you go ahead and share a little bit more about yourself and introduce your other panel members, if you will.
Okay, be happy to. All right, well, I'm actually a fourth generation appraiser here. I'm with a firm here in town that's been around since 1911, and we do primarily residential appraisals. And I'm an active leader in our community and formed the statewide appraisal coalition and things of that nature, and am very proactive with legislative matters that help advocate for the appraisers and protect our industry. So that's enough on me. Why don't I let each of you introduce yourselves? Mick?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Mick Koenig. I'm obviously a real estate appraiser. I primarily do commercial real estate, so I kind of represent the commercial side of the appraiser committee here. We've got some other guys that do the same, but nevertheless, myself, I'm second generation appraiser. My father's an appraiser, Kim Koenig. We're just a two-person shop up in Dublin, so we're not as big as Tom and some of the other guys' firms around town. So we tend to, like I say, we specialize more in some of the commercial stuff here in town. We try to stay pretty local and keep to our roots here. So anyway, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Good morning. I'm Bill Uttley, the owner of Columbus Appraisal Company. We kind of a full-service appraisal company. We do primarily residential, but I'm also a general certified appraiser, and we do commercial appraisals also. Been in business quite a long time, since about 1980, and I've actually been a member of the Columbus Board of Realtors. I got my real estate license in 1977, something like that. So been around a while, and I've seen it from your side of the table too, but I don't practice actively as a real estate agent. I never have, but I certainly respect the efforts and hard work that you folks do. I serve I've got different hats. I'm the government relations chairman for the Appraisal Institute's Ohio chapter. So I, along with working with Tom, we've been looking at some legislation here for Ohio that would affect the appraisal industry. And I also have served on Hilliard City Council for quite a number of years, including 4 as president. So glad to see so many people here and look forward to, I think, a lively discussion.
Hello, I'm Ralph Berger. I'm a real estate appraiser. In fact, my broker also. I started in real estate in March of 1974. And I remember my first meeting. I looked and I said, "Boy, look at all these old guys." Now I am the old guy. I'd like to see Gary Parsons. He's been here about as long as I have. I had to get him before he gets me. I have a mid-sized appraisal company. We do all types of appraisals in Central Ohio. I've been on many committees with the Board of Realtors. I'm a full member of the Board of Realtors, have been since 1974. I don't use a broker's license now except for personal matters, but I call Gary when I need help. That's it.
Okay, great. Fantastic, guys. Thank you. So we have a great deal of experience on our panel board, so I know they'll be able to, and they're up to answering any of the questions that we can present to them today. Just wanted to talk a little bit more about how we got here. We took this very seriously. We thought about the information that was coming to us on the evaluation forms, and we said we have to know our audience. We have to know what your needs are. We want to make sure that the content is relevant to what you're dealing with day in and day out, and present that in such a way that you take away something that will be helpful. So to do that, we had to ask you some questions. So we polled 2 classes. We compiled those responses, synthesized the information so that we could come up with some themes, if you will, in terms of what's pressing, what's on your mind. We discussed what those themes and resolutions would be with partners on the appraisal committee, so know that this was not created out of a vacuum. But we dealt honestly with a lot of the content and subject matter that you wanted us to look at, and that's what we're bringing to you in the form of this conversational forum. Hopefully this can generate more conversation and better programs to serve you. So again, it is extremely important that you give us good, actionable feedback on your evaluation forms, because we use that information to develop and to improve. Okay? So we talked about some of the things we needed to present, and we wanted to make sure that we had a good background of what does it take to become an appraiser, also what are the processes and procedures, as well as best practices. So I've heard me say that before. You'll probably hear me say that again so that you recall. So what we want to get into now is talk about what does it really take to become an appraiser, and we're going to kick that over to Ralph and let him address that topic.
There are 3 types of appraisers in the state of Ohio with their licensing procedure. You have a licensed appraiser. They can do houses up to $1 million, but not to $1 million. Certified appraiser. I'm sorry. Is this on? Yes. Okay. In the state of Ohio, licenses are for 3 types of appraisers. You have a licensed appraiser. They can do real estate up or under $1 million. A certified appraiser. You can do residential properties up to $1 million or over $1 million, and small multifamily up to 4 families. Then you have a general certified appraiser who can do all types of appraisals in the state of Ohio. When an appraiser takes an assignment, though, if he's not familiar with a certain type of property, he has to seek help from somebody who is and clarify that in his appraisal report. First step to becoming an appraiser is you have to take 75 hours of education. Then you have to apply to be a state registered appraiser's assistant. You also need to get fingerprinted. After you become an appraiser's assistant, I'm going to probably deal mostly with state certified appraisers, because to do FHA for residential work, this is what's required. You have to sign up with a mentor. The mentor has to be a certified appraiser. It takes a minimum of 2 years. You need 2,500 hours of experience. You have to take an additional 130 hours of education, or 125 hours of education. If you had your started after 12/31/12, the requirements changed, and they're going to make the big change next year. So you need a bachelor's degree, the additional 125 hours. Then you apply for your exam. When you apply for your exam, you have to send in all your records of the appraisals that you've done. It's called a log. They review your log. They review the classes that you've taken. Then they send back and they say, maybe send in 3, 4, or 5 appraisals. They review your appraisals. At that point in time, after you pass that, you're eligible to take the exam. You can't take longer than 2 years. Some people take 4 years to get those hours in. Then you take your exam. After you take your exam, you become a licensed appraiser. When I started in the business, to be an appraiser, you just had to say you were one. There's no requirements whatsoever. So it's come a long way. There are designations out there. There's an SRA, MAI, and other different designations. Those are through the Appraisal Institute. Before licensing, a lot of banks would require, well, we want somebody that has more experience, so we want someone who's an MA or SRA, but that's all changed with time. It's mostly now, are you licensed, are you certified, are you general designation, and the banks can hang their hat on that. That's it for the licensing.
Okay, just a couple questions that I thought of when we were going through this is, can a licensed appraiser actually appraise property and submit reports? Licensed? So you kind of gave us some different levels,
Well,
right?
as the associate, they have to be accompanied on all appraisals with their mentor.
Okay,
Licensed appraiser can appraise all residential properties under $1 million.
Okay.
And small multifamily,
okay.
But not FHA.
but not
But
FHA.
not FHA. All right. And you talked a little bit about the difference between a certified appraiser and a licensed appraiser. So a certified can appraise over $1 million, is that correct?
Yes, on
Okay.
residential. It's a little less requirements right now for a licensed appraiser, but anybody going into the field, I would recommend that they become a certified appraiser.
Okay,
That way, more doors are open.
okay. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the mentorship with that appraiser?
The mentorship, you have to find someone who's certified appraiser. You have to submit that with your application. They have to be accepted. They have to be in good standing. It's a great way to learn. When I was appraising, I went with the Department of Transportation. I took a lot of classes, learned that way. It's a hard business to get into because a lot of people don't want to take, excuse me, the time to mentor somebody as it slows you down as you do the appraisals. And right, excuse me, right now the compensation for appraisals and the requirements for appraisals has really led to a decline in people becoming new appraisers.
Okay.
We're an aging field. I think the average appraiser is probably, well, I'm sorry, I think the average appraiser right now is probably over 60 years old. We do not have very many people coming into the field.
Okay, good to know. Anyone else want to weigh in on?
Thank you.
Yeah, we're on the heels of an appraiser shortage right now. And many industries are a graying profession. I mean, we can look around the room at each other here, and the average age, is not 35. So the appraisal profession right now is 62 on a national level, and over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be really having to ramp up and mentor the next generation of appraisers. So that'll be the biggest challenge that our profession faces, particularly with the steep requirements to get into this profession. There's not many folks that are willing to have gone through college and have earned a bachelor's degree and then have to go through another 2 years of mentorship with nominal earnings just before they can even challenge the state board exam. And in Ohio, there's a 70% fail rate with that exam. It's not a cakewalk. Most appraisers that are challenging that exam, it takes 2 to 3 times before they're successful. And we're working with our division of real estate right now to try to make that exam in 3 parts, just like the attorneys or the CPAs or anybody else, so that appraisers can challenge that exam in 3 sections. Right now, it's all one 8-hour period, and it's very tough for someone that's just getting in to thoroughly understand and know all 3 approaches to value. And so anyway, the profession not unlike many, is facing the next generation to hopefully enter. And the mentorship is a very challenging process on both sides of the equation. For the assistant trainee, registered assistant, you have to find a certified appraiser that is willing to take you on for 2 years. And that means on every assignment that you do, that other appraiser has to go with you on. And the old sort of the fear in this profession has always been, you're training today's trainees, tomorrow's competitor. So that always exists. But hopefully, if you can align yourself with the right type of individuals that have the interest and desire and share the same commitment and are like-minded, you can hopefully nurture a long-term professional relationship from that. And so getting into this, just qualifying with the educational requirements is not easy. And then trying to get a good mentor is equally challenging. But I would encourage anyone, or those that you know, that this is a golden opportunity. This is an excellent time to consider becoming an appraiser. Because, as you know, with supply and demand, when there's too few appraisers, what happens to fees? And that in itself will spell a lot of good things over the next 10 to 20 year cycle. So I would advocate it's a great time to be an appraiser.
Can I ask you a question?
Well, actually, if we could hold our questions towards the end. We'll loop back to you towards the end. Thank you. Got to keep it moving. I appreciate it. Thank you. So on to the next topic. We want to talk a little bit about the processes and procedures that appraisers are held to. So we're going to ask Mick to kind of share some information with us on that.
All right, guys. Now, if you're not awake already, this isn't going to help what I'm about ready to talk about. So just hang with me. But it's nonetheless, it's a little boring, but it's very important to our profession. Basically, it's what we're held to, our standards that we're held to are set by the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, otherwise known as USPAP, USPAP, kind of, we refer to them in different ways. But anyway, in a nutshell, USPAP, it's a document that sets minimum requirements for all state licensed and certified appraisers to follow and work from when performing appraisal services for not only real estate, but also personal property and or intangibles or business valuation. A large portion, and actually I brought a copy of it. Here it is right here. You can kind of see how thick it is. Now, there's a lot of stuff in here that's more informative. It's not all the rules that we have to abide by, but it's a pretty thick document, and there's a lot of good information in there. But nevertheless, a large portion of that spells out, rules that we must follow as appraisers, such as being ethical. I mean, what profession doesn't have that? But that's kind of first and foremost.
Small type.
Yeah, small type too. So anyway, but so like I said, being ethical it speaks to that. But it essentially gives us a roadmap to follow for developing our opinions of value through properly researching the data that we need, and then helping us to basically analyze that data and put it all into our appraisal reports. Now, within this document, there's actually 10 standards or something like that. But the first two are the most important for us when we're writing the types of appraisals that are done for lending purposes or real estate transactions and stuff. And so, but I'll get back to that in just a minute. USPAP, as Ralph had mentioned earlier, prior to 1987, there was no licensure for appraisers. I mean, as long as you're, you called yourself an appraiser and you had clients that trusted you and stuff. I mean, anybody could be an appraiser. So basically, what happened in about 1986 or whatnot was the S&L crisis, and so at that point, there were several organizations, professional organizations already in place, for appraisers that basically realized, okay, crap, we got to we got to get some sort of common ground here for appraisers to all follow and you know, create some sort of licensure. So a lot of these, the heads of these organizations got together and they formed basically, this is just a quick summary, but they formed what they called the Appraisal Foundation, and started to draft these common standards that appraisers they felt should abide by. Well, and then in about 1987, actually, Congress, they identified the Appraisal Foundation as the source for setting and maintaining appraisal standards and appraiser qualifications. So that pretty much solidified at that point that USPAP was the industry standard for practice in the appraisal profession. And now, you know, federal law requires that states use USPAP and teach USPAP in their certifications and their licensure programs. So, and also, you know, any federally related transaction, I think that's over $250,000 or something, actually still requires an appraisal to be done by a licensed or certified appraiser that adheres to USPAP. The report itself has to adhere to the standards that USPAP states. So what does USPAP require from us as appraisers? A lot, but I'm going to hit on some key points here. And the first, like I said before, and probably the most important, is just, you know, being ethical. I mean, you know, we need to, you know, prove to our peers and to the industry at large or whatnot that we're, you know, that we're good, upstanding, you know, professionals and know what we're doing. And so anyway, you know, along with that, you know, USPAP requires us to be competent in valuing certain types of property, as Ralph mentioned, and if we're not, it allows us then to take the steps necessary to become competent, basically, you know, connecting with another appraiser that's had experience in appraising that type of property or whatnot, just to get us up to the standard of being able to appraise such type of property. It requires us to properly identify the problem to be solved in order to determine the appropriate scope of work, which is very important. So when we're asked to perform an appraisal, you know, for lending purposes, you know, like I said, the ones that you guys are probably accustomed to seeing, most people are accustomed to seeing, USPAP requires us to follow, as I mentioned earlier, two main standards, like I said, Standard 1 and Standard 2. Standard 1 essentially addresses the requirements that should be followed when we're like researching and developing you know, our appraisal. You know, for example, we must be aware and it states we must be aware and understand and correctly employ those recognized methods, techniques that are necessary to ultimately produce a credible appraisal. We shouldn't knowingly commit a substantial error or omission or commission that would significantly impact the appraisal results. I mean, that's kind of obvious, but it needs to be stated. USPAP states, you know, we shouldn't render our appraisal services in a careless and negligent manner. You know, the standard, it also talks about, you know, the development stage of the appraisal. Within the Standard 1, it basically defines and says that, you know, you need to figure out who your client is and what the intended use of the appraisal report is for. And who the intended users are as well. I mean, who's going to use this report? Who's going to see it? And what are they going to use it for? Mortgage purposes, you know, I don't know, then we could get into estates or, you know, investment type situations and whatnot. We have to figure out, you know, the type of value that's required, you know, the effective date of our opinion of value, meaning the date that we go in and look at and tour the property, that becomes our effective date. That's the date that we are valuing the property as of. Our report's not done that day, but it may take us, you know, I don't know, on the residential side, it may take us, you know, I don't know, they expect it to be done, in an hour, but, you know, it's more like, you know, a couple days later. In the commercial side, it could be a couple weeks later. So that's the date of the report, and that needs to be stated in there as well. But, you know, USPAP, in this stage, in this standard, they want us to, you know, look at the physical, legal, and economic characteristics of the property and consider any extraordinary assumptions or hypothetical conditions that maybe that the client wants us to consider when valuing the property. We also need to look at, you know, we need to look at and analyze the impact on value as far as, you know, zoning or any types of encumbrances or encroachments or whatnot that are part of the property. And we also need to develop, you know, an opinion of the highest and best use of that property as well. Basically, we need to look at it in two different two different stages, two different settings as far as, I mean, if the property is improved, we need to consider it as vacant. What is its highest and best use? What, use would bring the maximum amount of money to this property if it were to be improved, if it were vacant. But then if it is, improved, we also have to analyze it and make sure that the improvement that's on there maximally produces, the highest value to that site as well. So, the next one that USPAP talks about is, again, we're still in the development stage of our appraisal process, but it tells us that we really need to collect. When we're collecting our data, we need to verify our data, and that's why we're calling you guys and bugging you guys. And this is one of the main reasons why. I mean, it's not just because USPAP tells us to, but it's we're trying to get a sense of what's going on in the market. You guys are the eyes and the ears out there talking to the buyers and the sellers and stuff, and so you guys have a better grasp on, where the market is at any given point. So our job is to call you guys and say, hey, you had this listing, or, you represent the buyer in this situation. Was it arm's length? Was it distressed? Did it sell for market value? We're trying to make sure we've got all our facts straight, so we can then go back and accurately report what's going on in the market at the time. And of course, with residential, I mean, it's mostly geared at sales, and so we're starting to have to look at listings as well. So that's why a lot of times we'll call you on your listings too and say, hey, how's activity been? You got listed here. Is that your price? Is that the seller's price? How did you come up with that price? You know what I mean? Because anybody can ask what they want. But our job, again, is to just kind of make sure we know where the market is and make sure we're not looking at listings that are, listed for something silly, because anybody can ask whatever they want. You know what I mean? When we're doing our analysis to try and, hone it down and get to a real number. So anyway, and along those lines, USPAP also requires us to analyze any agreements of sale, options, or or listings of the property as of our effective date. So if we get an assignment, we go out to a property, we know it's listed. If we're going to call you guys, and say, hey, again, how's activity been? If it's not in contract, I guess, how's activity been? Again, is this this list price? Is this yours? Is this the seller? Is this the seller telling you, no, this is where I want it to be, or whatnot? So we're all trying to figure out where things all kind of fall together. Now, the other thing that USPAP requires us to do is we need to analyze any prior sales of the property that we're appraising that have occurred within 3 years prior to our effective date of appraisal, which kind of seems, it makes sense to me anyway, if say we're asked to appraise a property and it had just sold, I don't know, 6 months ago, and so you kind of go, okay, why is it selling again? Or if it's in contract again to be sold or not, so you want to call the agent or anybody that's involved and try and verify information as to, it just sold 6 months ago, why? Was it arm's length? Was it distressed? Anything like that. 3 years ago, it can be argued that seems a little, that's a long time ago. I mean, when it comes to residential stuff, commercial, it may not be, that may be a pretty valid point to look at. But nevertheless, that's what USPAP requires us. And again, we're still in standard 1 here. So, but in taking all this together, then it also states that, we need to reconcile all the data basically and all the information that we found, and discuss, the relevance of the approaches that we use, the methods and techniques used to arrive at our final value conclusion. So,
The main reason to reconcile prior sales history has to do with flips, as most of you are aware of. And you can have a property that was an REO or distressed in some nature that sold for $50,000, and 3 months later it's been completely renovated. I don't mean paint, I mean everything, and it's now selling for $1.25 or something. That has to be reconciled. The appraiser has to give enough reasoning and justification for why they're appraising it now for 2 or 2.5 times as much as what it sold for within recent times.
Okay. So what we just talked about, again, that was just in standard 1. So that's just basically the development stage of the appraisal process. So we're just gathering our data at that point. We've looked at the subject property. We've started gather our data, analyze the sales from the market and supply and demand and zoning and all kinds of stuff. And we've pretty much at that point figured out what we think the value of the property is. Well, then standard 2, as I talked about in USPAP, then is more of the reporting side of it, or how we report all that information in our appraisal reports. So basically, it states that every report we write must clearly and accurately set forth the appraisal in a manner which is not misleading. Obviously, it kind of makes sense. But it also states, we must maintain sufficient information to enable the intended users of the appraisal to understand the report properly, meaning we need to put enough information in there so that, people that have asked us to do the appraisal can read through it and not be confused by the time they get to the end of it as to what they're reading. USPAP now, they just made a change. It's revised every couple of years, and the most recent revision, there used to be 3 types of reports we could write. Now there's 2. One is an appraisal report, and the other is a restricted appraisal report. Now, I guess I'll start with the restricted. The restricted appraisal report is really only intended for one user, meaning, it doesn't matter. If a homeowner calls us and says, I want to know what the value of my home is, can you do an appraisal? Okay, fine. We always ask during the scope, what in the very beginning, and when we're trying to define the problem, who are the intended users of this report? Well, it's just going to be me. I'm just curious what the value of my house is. Okay, fine. Well, from that standpoint, then we know we can do a restricted appraisal report, because it doesn't, basically, that homeowner who's going to be reading that report, they know their house, they know the market, they know, the neighborhood and stuff. So we don't need to put all that information into the report. Really, all they're really concerned about probably is the sales that we're using, the analysis and stuff that we're using, and sales to come up with what we think that the value of that house is. Now, that information is all in a restricted report. However, the content of an appraisal report is a lot broader. Typically banks, they want to see an appraisal report because, they're not always local. There's I don't know. They make loans. There's big banks that are all over, and so they want to see. They want explanation as to what's the neighborhood. Do a market analysis on this thing. Go into great detail on the site itself, and the improvements and the surrounding land uses, and I mean it gets pretty involved. So those are the 2 types of reports that we can write according to USPAP, and the scope of work pretty much, like I said, kind of dictates how detailed of the report we get with the appraisal report anyway, versus the restricted appraisal report. The standard goes on to state that each report, again, must, and we did this in standard 1 anyway, but we need to define who the client is and the intended users, the intended use, the interest being appraised, meaning fee simple, do they want leased fee, leasehold values, the type of definition and value, meaning you want market value, you want investment value. There's different values, and there's different definitions that different organizations have come up with. So we got to be real cognizant on what type of value we're being asked to give. Again, we have to get the effective date of the appraisal and the date of the report. We summarize our scope of work in these appraisals. And let's see what else. We need to state the use and of the real estate at the time of value. What it's being used for. Obviously, if it's a single-family residential house, it's probably owner-occupied, but could be rented. But we need to state those things. Basically, and then summarize everything at the end and state any kind of extraordinary assumptions and reconcile our value and methodologies that we've used. Now, USPAP also requires that we put in basically a signed certification at the end too that states a lot of stuff about us being unbiased third parties. That we are an unbiased third party. But nevertheless, that's most of it. Again, there's other sections I won't really get into, but some of the, just a real brief summary of those other sections. There's a third standard that kind of goes over the review process, on what appraisers need to do when they're performing reviews of appraisals from other appraisers. They talk, it goes through, it talks about how to develop and research and develop like mass appraisals for ad valorem tax purposes. and personal property, and like I said, business or business valuation. There's advisory opinions in here too that basically give guidance on how USPAP is to be applied in specific situations. So it kind of gives us kind of real world type scenarios that we can kind of reference, and during our appraisal career, if we come across a certain situation where we're not really sure, we might be able to find it in here and reference it. And same goes for, there's a frequently asked questions section here as well that actual appraisers have sent questions to an arm of the appraisal foundation to get guidance on. And so if they feel it's pertinent enough, they'll publish it in this document. So anyway, but again, USPAP requires now from a licensure standpoint that everybody, and as the guys kind of mentioned earlier, as you're trying to become licensed, you have to take a 15-hour USPAP course and pass a test before sitting for the state test. And those of us who are already certified, we have to take, basically for CE, every 2 years we have to take a 7-hour USPAP update course, which just kind of basically goes over any of the changes that have been made over the last 2 years. Because again, this is a working document. I mean, it's constantly changing. So anyway, as I said, in a nutshell, USPAP, it provides minimum standards and for appraisers to follow and perform the appraisal services. And ultimately, what it does is it helps us establish a little bit more trust with in the public's eyes for our profession, and so now we've got these standards. We can all kind of levels the playing field for all of us appraisers, and gives us a certain framework to work from. So.
Great, thank you very much. Extremely informative. And that's going to dovetail very nicely into best practices. So trying to condense all of that down into what's going to be meaningful to you when you're interacting with your appraiser. And we're going to kick that out to Bill. Bill, if you could kind of give me the short version on that, we can get back on track with our time.
Oh, no problem. And thanks, Mick, for covering the insomnia portion of the program today.
I was waiting for the music to start playing.
So, all right. So now you have an idea of the significant educational and experience requirements that appraisers must accomplish, and you've got a feel for the USPAP requirements that we all live under every day, and the basic appraisal process that we must complete when we do this. And the key is we're here to produce a credible appraisal report that the value estimate can be relied upon by the lender and the end users. But what does that mean to you? The best practices, I think, are critical, and I would imagine by just the fact this room has been filled with a lot of people, that maybe sometimes your interactions with appraisers weren't always the best, and maybe it affected a loan, or maybe it affected a sale of a property, and so there are ways to help when you're dealing with properties. The other thing is, when you're dealing with a tract home in a subdivision where there's 10 sales in the past 3 months, that's not going to be an issue. And you're dealing with a house that the owners just spent $75,000 remodeling, and you can eat off the floor. That normally is not going to be an appraisal problem. Maybe once in a while with comps and so forth, but it's those properties that are more unusual, or you had whatever reason there was difficulty marketing the property, or it needs updating. It's an estate sale, or it's some other properties, and the buyers are trying to get conforming financing, but the appraisal comes back and there's issues. I guess one thing, there's going to be a common theme to my comments and probably the other panelists here, is to engage with the appraiser early on these difficult properties. Anticipate potential issues that this property may have. Obviously, significant repairs like a roof leaking or mechanical problems, things like that. A conforming lender, it's going to be required to be fixed. So time is critical. Engage with the appraiser before the report is completed. Submit information that's critical to the appraiser. Could very well include the marketing information that this house, you had it on the market for 7 days, and you had 5 offers. That's important to the appraiser it should be important to the appraiser when they're evaluating and having difficulty maybe trying to justify the purchase price. Like, for some reason, we are here to reflect the market. We're not here to make the market. We should be reflecting all aspects of the market. So to me, it's quite important to know that if you got into a bidding war, then we need to know, from our standpoint, try to analyze that. And, okay, why is this property so hot? It could be the first rule in real estate, it could be location. As there are certain neighborhoods in this past couple of summers that just really exploded. Clintonville and Grandview and certain other pocket markets. The prices in my 30-some years doing appraisals, I've never seen some of the appreciation that were in these isolated markets. But in other areas of Columbus, they're still struggling, and those areas, thankfully, are somewhat isolated and are a lot smaller as far as geographic areas than they used to be. But there are some that are still struggling, and this year wasn't as strong as last year for whatever reason. There seems to be a shortage of listings, but there also doesn't seem to be, normally when there's a shortage of listings, you see price appreciation. And in the majority of neighborhoods in the Columbus area, when we are required to do, when we do an appraisal report for residential conforming loans, we typically have to do what's called an MC form. And that allows us to analyze the market and each sub-market, I should say, of properties that are competitive with the property that we're appraising. And this year, we have not seen the property appreciation that we saw that was so widespread last year. But overall, the market is better. Some other things, make sure, you don't need to make sure, but if the appraiser asks for a signed copy of the contract, understand the lender is required to provide that. But there's times when we are dealing with AMCs from California, by the time it gets electronically sent to them and then back to us, if the appraiser asks for a signed contract, we can't complete the report until we know that. And we need to know all the facts up ahead of time. If there's closing costs in there, we just need to know the facts. That's all we want is the facts. Just, okay, there was $3,000 in closing costs and the final purchase price was XYZ, whatever. But sometimes that can delay an appraisal when we don't get those facts up front. We talked about if there was multiple contract offers. Historical data can also be important. Certain neighborhoods, especially pocket neighborhoods, if you have a home that's in a area where there's been limited sales, but you're aware that the house next door, which was very similar, sold, let's say, just over a year ago. Now, that's important for us to understand. Sometimes when you're doing your research, lenders beat it into you. They don't want anything over a year, so you don't normally run that history that far back. But those sales could be critical sometimes as a fourth or fifth comp to help you produce a credible result and make sure that we're being as accurate as possible. Another thing that can affect appraisals is if there was undue stress, and you might be aware of a comparable. Again, let's say that it's a very similar house that just sold on the same street, but it sold for $20,000 less than the property you have in contract. Well, that's not going to, when we look at the MLS, that's not going to jump out at us when we look at the interior photos and of that comparable, and it looks very similar to ours and it's got similar features. But the fact that there was undue stress on the seller, that they maybe were being relocated to another city and had to get out of there, or maybe they had an illness, or there had been some other divorce or some other situation going on that doesn't show up, and you have intimate knowledge of that, relate that to the appraiser. Explain, hey, I know this comp's coming in low, but here's the situation. They had to sell, and they were desperate for essentially what's a quick sale. One comp doesn't make the appraisal. However, when you have, I've seen that happen before, where there was a situation and the appraiser wasn't aware of it, and there was other comps that were justifying the price, but this one was sticking out. It could be a problem. Again, when you're the appraisers, what we do when there are unusual features with a property, you need to understand your local submarket, and that can be when you're dealing with positive features, being on a golf course, backing to a waterfront situation. You've got a boat dock permit, and they're grandfathered in and they're rare. Unusual things like that may or may not be the appraiser may or may not be aware of, bring that to their attention and let them know if you're in a historical district, you've got an historical designation. There's a number of factors that may not be readily available to the appraiser that the realtor can convey to us and help us with our evaluation of those properties. And I guess the other thing is be aware of the regulations too, if you, as much as possible, regarding certain types of loans. And FHA comes to mind. Their regulations are not nearly what they once were. Many of their required repairs have to deal with the safety and soundness of the property and the maintaining structural integrity. If the house is pre-1978, better not have any peeling paint on it, or that needs to be taken care of, and that's something you can be proactive on and have the owner do it as soon as or before the property is listed. But if there are repairs that you know that are necessary, or maybe they're part of the contract, it's a good idea to make sure the appraiser is aware of that, because sometimes that stuff could get buried down and cause undue delay in completing the report. But if there's issues that before you even list the property that you can address with the owner and have them correct them, that's probably going to benefit all parties. I would think that the property would show better, and the final sale price might be higher, and the appraiser would have less issues trying to get the repairs noted and corrected. So I guess just to summarize, just once again, is the main theme here is to be proactive, and once that appraisal report is submitted, then communication is severely restricted. The appraiser, after the report's turned in, is not the time to be throwing additional comments. Now, there may be legitimate comparables that you're aware of that the appraiser for some reason missed. Hopefully that's not the case, but when you're talking about, as was mentioned earlier, about geographic competency, and I have seen appraisers come into our market, or I'll have someone call me and say, hey, I got this appraisal back, and this guy was from Lima, and he showed up and was appraising this remodeled house in Bexley. And what do we do? And I've reviewed those reports before, and it's like, contact the lender, submit some good comparables that you felt this gentleman or person, whatever, did not include in the report. But you just have, that's about all you can do. You need to go through the lender, go through their process, and provide the lender facts. Give them the additional comparables, give them the facts that you feel the appraiser should be aware of. And one other thing, if I know that I'm looking at a property and I'm concerned about, I'm doing my preliminary research, and I know what the purchase price is. I have the contract in front of me, and my research is not jibing with what's on paper in front of me. I'll call the realtor and just ask, how was the listing price arrived at? What are there some comparables that you would want to share with me? Once in a while, that happened. That my mind or my research didn't produce those results for some unusual reason. That's not normally the case, but there have been a few that where I was not aware, or it was an historical sale that was over a year old, and again, it wasn't normally what we do for research because our lender requirements don't permit that. I say at this point we would.
We're about ready to go into our questions. So something about that microphone, it's like I get it and I don't want to let go. All right, well, it is all good information. We can tell they have so much to share with us. It's just about getting it processed so that we can, keep it moving and dive in a little bit deeper. So in regards to that, we want to talk about the questions that we kind of pulled out of the survey. So we're going to get right into it. And the first question is that I want to be walked through how an appraisal is completed and what factors are taken into consideration. And I have a challenge here for Mick, which is to keep your response under 5 minutes.
No
if you
problem.
could do that for me.
No
Thank
problem.
You.
Well, and actually, I've addressed a lot of this already with USPAP. As you can see, I'm going to stand up here real quick so I can look at this. But this flow chart here kind of shows at the bottom appraisal development. That's standard 1 that I talked about with USPAP. So when we get basically we get a request from a lender or whatnot that says we need you to appraise this property. We start and define the appraisal problem. Okay, well, what type of value do you need? Who's going to use this appraisal? What type of an appraisal do you need? Then we just kind of go down the line, determine the scope of work. Okay, like I said, what type of an appraisal do you need? How soon do you need it? Then once we figure out what the property is, then we start collecting our data, on the subject itself, but also on market information, sales, listings, income and expense information on income properties, so forth and so on. Then of course, we do the data analysis where we basically crunch all the numbers and try and figure out what we feel, or we start to do that anyway, and then we get into the developing the approaches, cost, sales, and income, which you guys are probably all familiar with. And then, of course, once we've got everything put together, crunched, and verified and whatnot, then we reconcile our value and final value of opinion. And then we get into the appraisal reporting, which again is standard 2. So then, I've already walked through that with you guys. You know what that's all about. And basically, the scope of the assignment kind of determines the type of appraisal report that we need to write. So, again, then we start to put all that into the appraisal. So, it's not that simple, as that. I mean, when we're doing our research, and I'll kind of show you, as we get my next question that's coming up here about, how's technology benefited us. It's good because when we're in the development stage of the appraisal process, we're going through, when we're gathering all our data, we're using, which, we all use is the internet, obviously, and I mean, it helps us. We go to the auditor's website, we go to the recorder's website, so we can get deeds, and the auditor gives us the property record cards and the plat maps and the sketches, and and not only for the subject, but once we figure out what our comparables are too, once we go to Flex or we go to Excelligent and pull that information, we also use those, the auditor's website or even the recorder's website to pull deeds and information on those properties, just to make sure that we've got all the right information for the comparables that we're going to use, or the land sales we're going to use, or so forth and so on. So anyway, I know that's kind of a quick, that's how the appraisal process is done. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add, but that's essentially how it goes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is that quick enough?
I love you for
All
it.
right,
Thank
good,
you. Ralph, you've been a little quiet, so let's talk to you a little bit. Can you answer a question for us regarding appraisers are calling for multiple inspections at the buyer's expense? Why would that be?
Well, first I want to thank everybody. When I call them up at 8 o'clock in the morning, 4:30 in the afternoon, verifying sales.
Could you speak up?
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to thank everybody in the room for verifying sales. I do call every morning between 8 and 9 o'clock, try to catch you at home before you take off. I can't do my business without talking to you. You know what's happening in the market. You're the tick of the market. We're just trying to reflect what's happened in the market, but I don't know without talking to you. I also, when I started in real estate, I gave discount to realtors who would give me appraisals. I'm a realtor myself. I thought this is a great idea. everything that ever came was hard, and I know that why. I can't give a discount anymore, but I know if you refer us, it's going to be a problem that you have, and that's what we're there for. One person in the room, I gave him a thank you for referring appraisal to me, and this is a true story. There was a log cabin that was floated down the Olentangy River and built in Worthington. I'm not going to look at him because he's sitting over here. But if you need the address, Gary Parsons could probably give it to you. Then they built all around this house, and a guy from California, of course, bought it. I think I lost about 10 days doing one appraisal with that one. And it did get through, but it took a lot of work. When I sold real estate, I'd take, years ago, Buckeye Federal, whoever it was, I'd take it in, and they'd say, we got a problem. I said, hey, I was nice enough to bring this into you. Let's get it closed. I need to make my commission. Boy, has the world changed now. You've got the appraiser, you've got the underwriter, you got the inspector. Appraisers have got the same thing. It got a lot harder for us. I had an appraiser who was going to quit the business this year. He says, well, they want this, this, and this. I said, it's not them, it's you. You haven't adjusted to what is required now. It helped him, but it is a lot harder. Every easy appraisal we ever got is done on a computer now. All we get is the middle and the hard ones. It takes us longer. I enjoy the work. I love the work. Now we're going to get into the problem. Appraisers calling for inspections at buyer's expense. It's to protect everybody. FHA came out years ago and they said, we want to know, and you have to tell us when a roof has only 2 years left in its life. I can't tell you that. I use the term near future to protect myself. I say, I don't want to call for inspection, but sometimes I have to. I'll say, I know the roof's 22 years old. It's probably a 20-year roof. I don't see any signs of leaks, but I'll make a comment in my report. In the near future, the roof will probably need to be replaced. This way, it gets the loan through. But what typically, I'd say 80% of the properties we appraise have an inspection done on it. 20% are as is, and I understand what as is means. But let's say I get there, it looks like mold. I had one the other day, there's white carpet in the basement. I see black mold on the drywall. I got to call for inspection. If I don't, I'm derelict in my duties, and it's to protect the bank, it's to protect me, and it's to protect the realtor, because when a lawsuit goes out, they throw that net on everybody involved with that. Innocent or not, it's probably going to cost you $5,000 to defend yourself. I'm not afraid of lawsuits, but at the
Hold
same
mic.
time, I'm not afraid of lawsuits, but at the same time, we have to protect everybody. Appraisers are not contractors and generally will call for inspection on items that appear, if not corrected, could cause further or worse damage. Roof, mold, wet basements, wiring out of sorts, obvious deficiency. As I said, I understand what as is means, but however, in order to appraise a property, as is, I need to know the cost to cure that property. If you have a furnace, is it the thermostat? Is it the whole furnace needs replaced? I don't know, but so I take that, I call it the porcupine. I throw that out to an inspector. Now I have something I can say, this guy says it's this. I'm only as good as that licensed contractor, whatever he says it is, but I can't tell what's wrong with the furnace. I don't know if the roof leaks, if it's a flashing, if it's just a rubber molding around something. I don't know if the roof's been fixed or not. It's not my job to be an inspector, but a lot of times people call me the inspector, and I'm not an inspector, I'm an appraiser. So this is why there's inspections, is to protect everybody. We don't like to call for inspections. Sometimes I'll say, the roof needs an inspection. They said the inspection is okay, you should go out and inspect. I said, no, I don't need to inspect it. You've got an inspector that used what he said. So it's just to protect everybody. No one likes to call for inspections, but sometimes it's necessary. And I don't know what the property's worth sometimes unless I know what it costs to fix it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question is for Tom. What are some of the main factors that go into appraisals that would help a realtor better know what a home will appraise for?
Well, the old adage, location, location, location. But beyond that, something I can share with you that I think will be more meaningful, that can help you regardless of location, is a method called the bracketing concept. And what that is it simply shows anybody what the property is either worth or not worth on either side of the equation. And And how you do that with your CMAs or your BPOs is you find a property that's clearly superior and one that's clearly inferior, whether that's size, quality, whatever the physical characteristics that jump out at you. And of course, the top line, the sale prices, will correspond with that respectively. In many cases, it's a lot easier to prove what something's not worth than what it is worth. So if you back into this valuation exercise, you can do that more convincingly first, and most importantly to yourself, so that then you're in a sound position to articulate that to your potential homeowner that you're trying to get a listing from. That obviously everybody's home is their castle, nobody has an ugly baby, and everybody thinks their house is worth far more than what it actually is, including myself probably. So because of that dynamic that you're up against when you're trying to obtain a listing, you have a great advantage when you employ the bracketing concept. And you don't have to be an appraiser to do that. So I would encourage you to consider that. By doing that approach also, you take a lot of the subjectivity away from valuing a property. In other words, you can tell by the sale prices, before you even have to make any adjustments, the likely range of value that a property is in. And then hopefully as you fine-tune that and analyze that raw data, the unadjusted data, the sale prices, and make the respective judgment calls, adjustments that you deem credible, that adjusted range of value then from those sale prices will then further imply a range of value, hopefully, that the property is likely worth. There's 3 comparable sales for a reason on Fannie Mae forms, and mainly it's because of what I've just articulated to you, the bracketing concept. By using one that's inferior, superior, and then hopefully one that's as similar as possible, it'll be much more clearer to you what the property is worth. So that's probably one of the single best things that I can impart to you that would help you do a better job in knowing what a home is worth. And then just quickly to circle back on a few other things we've talked about that I think would be beneficial for you is recognizing when you are marketing a home, it could be the types of financing out there, whether it's a conventional buyer, FHA, or VA. There are 3 different sets of requirements of how that home will be appraised depending on which way it goes. And to anticipate that in terms of what the potential repairs or inspections, it could be called, depending upon which type of financing the property may go through. And then being proactive to that, not reactive, but proactive. And you all have a golden opportunity at the time a property is appraised to interact with the appraiser. That is your best chance to make your case about the property that you've worked hard to first get the listing and then get into contract. I would argue continue working, protect your commission, get the thing to the closing table, meet the appraiser on the deals that you know are Hail Marys or tight. I'm not advocating that on every single deal, but you all know when you've got a delicate situation that could go either way. And those are the properties that I would encourage you to not rely on centralized showing, just to have the appraiser go through the property and you don't even maybe realize it. That's the time to be at the property, hand the appraiser information that was the basis of your situation, whether that's a stack of comparable sales, competing listings, the information that's already been conveyed about the circumstances of the transaction, the motivations of the seller, and anything else that you feel is pertinent. For example, whether it's good or bad, let's just say the home backs to a railroad track. Hit that head on. Let the appraiser know, hey, this site is 300 feet deep. It's hardly an active railway. There may be 1 or 2 trains a week. That's different than a dozen trains a day and a home that's right up on the tracks. So make your argument, convey your opinions or the market's reaction, the feedback from the people that came through that property. And, put your sales hat on and let the appraiser know that. Now, the appraiser still ultimately may view that one way or another, but at least you've made a case for and have shared important information with the appraiser. Inspections. One of the number one things in this region that inspections are called for in most cases are foundations. We have a lot of frost line cracks, those horizontal cracks that are about 2 to 3 cinder blocks down, from gutters that haven't been cleaned, improper drainage, negative drainage into the foundation, and obviously that freezes and that pushes the wall inward, it bows it and it cracks it. None of us are structural engineers. We are, we're not able to render an opinion of if that is a sound foundation wall or if it requires any repairs or alterations. That's what a PE structural engineer does. So a lot of times you'll see inspections called for that very factor. And, you may head that off by already being proactive when you see that clearly when you go through the home, by having the owner already obtain, hopefully through an engineer, but at least a home inspector, something in writing that states that perhaps it's not an adverse condition. And then that can be on the front end provided to the appraiser, and of course the appraiser can reference and include that in their report as an exhibit and not make it an issue, when we can point to someone else that said it's not an issue. So that's just an example. I think that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. If you could pass the mic over to Bill, the next question would be for him. And this is kind of a situational question. Appraiser insisted that they had to stay in a 2-mile area, but much older homes or condos dominated that particular neighborhood. Why can't he look at the comps based on a build time within a year, same bedrooms, number of bathrooms by the same builder, so on and so forth? So can you shed some light on that in about 2 minutes?
Oh, absolutely. Well, it only takes 3 words: location, location, location. So there you go. It is based on location, and Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the rules that they have and guidelines that they have pushed down the pipeline to the various lenders and so forth. The location, our experience has taught us, and across the country, is critical, and it's difficult to. And no one would argue that if I'm looking at a property in Gahanna that I'm going to pull 3 comps from Upper Arlington. I think I would no longer receive any new assignments. So that's such an obvious example. But when you are faced with unique situations, though, at times when this is kind of a good example when a builder identifies a niche market. Let's say it's just for example, maybe south of downtown, and they decide to go in and build some new condominiums. And it's a hot market. They're getting lots of activity, but there's no sales of similar age condos in the area, and some of the lenders are very picky about age and obviously I just said locations. But so what you need to do in that, when you're, especially in a brand new niche market like that, is to interview the builder and get information on other condos, what his sales activity has been. As long, you know, if you can document the fact that he's got, let's say he's got a little 10 unit project and he's got 3 in contract, he's had 20 some showings of the model and several by folks that have come back the second time or third time, whatever, and is entering and thinking about negotiating. Those are important facts that the appraiser can utilize in his report, and especially if you have other condos in that project that are in contract, they can be considered as an additional comparable. You're still going to have to justify the value with other sales that have closed. The lenders won't, you've got to have a minimum of 3 closed sales for conforming loans. But local market activity it can be critical when you're in these new areas to produce a credible report and hopefully make it acceptable to the lender.
Excellent, well done. All right, next, Mick, we're going to talk about how has technology impacted the efficiency and accuracy of appraisals.
Okay. Well, as I said earlier, you know, I think we've all been impacted by the internet. I mean, I remember when I started in the business, which I guess wasn't that long ago, but it's been 16, 17 years ago. You know, when I first tried to get information on the subject property and my comparable sales, when I had to pick the phone up, call the courthouse, you know, and start asking questions. Call the auditor, call the recorder's office, you know, to get information. Now, you know, you see here, you know, we go to, you know, the auditor is typically where we start as appraisers. When we get an assignment, we go here, you know, we'll go to the auditor's website, or we'll go to, you know, Google Maps or Bing to try to look at it aerially and see where it's located. But, you know, obviously the auditor then starts to help us kind of nail down and drill down as far as what the property is that we're going to be appraising. You know, it gives us, you know, like I said before, you know, plat maps, gives us, you know, just the critical information that we need as far as, you know, square footage and so forth and so on. So anyway, but you can see, yeah, so we go, you know, auditor, we can go to the recorder's office, and you can see the tabs at the top, but these are things that we go through as appraisers, a lot of times not just, you know, through our research once we have an assignment, but we do this a lot of times on the front end when the client calls and says, hey, we need you to appraise this property, can you give us a fee and turn time on what it's going to cost? Well, here's what we do. A lot of times we'll go to the auditor's office, website, we go to the recorder's office, we go to Flex, you know, we'll go to Excelligent for commercial stuff, you know, just to get a sense, you know, on what the subject is. And sometimes, you know, because we look at not only what the county records have on the property, but we look at, you know, it's listed, if it's listed for sale, if it's in contract, or if it was listed and it's expired recently, you know, we look at that stuff. Other stuff that we can do too to analyze the subject and the market area in which it's located. Actually, Jeannie, if you want to go back one, is something that our office uses a lot as Site to Do Business. It gives us, you know, flood maps, which, you know, conventional loans, we got to have flood information in there, but it also gives us demographics, which is really cool because you can do a radius, you know, around the subject 1, 3, 5 miles, or you can draw your own, you know, polygon to kind of figure out, you know, if you're in a kind of a niche, you know, it'll give you specific demographics as far as, you know, what's around the subject. So anyway, and then, you know, also, of course, the next one is zoning, you know, for Franklin County anyway. We can go to One Stop Shop and kind of look at this stuff. So anyway, so all this stuff combined has helped us really, we're able to get our hands on the information that we need a lot quicker than we used to be able to. Now, as far as writing the reports, again, I do commercial work, so I write big books typically, and I use Word and Excel is typically what us commercial appraisers use. There have been some commercial software programs that are kind of starting to be written. I use one. It's called Narrative One. I know Ralph uses Narrative One and Appraisal. What's it called? Appraisal Paradise. So they're starting to come online. You know, it helps us populate fields, just simple things like dates. You put a date in one, our effective date of appraisal in one spot, and then it populates it throughout the rest of the report. You know what I mean? So we don't have to go back and keep changing stuff and remember to change things. So from that aspect, it's helped us, obviously with cameras, we all have digital cameras anymore. I know a lot of people are starting to use their phones to take pictures. With clouds and stuff, I feel like I'm kind of behind the times, but my way of thinking is, it'd be nice to be able to get out there with your camera, which I understand, I think there is a camera out or coming out where you can take, like Verizon or any of these wireless carriers are going to have, where you take a picture and your pictures are already uploaded to the cloud or something, so you don't have to worry about, if you drop your camera, something happens to it, it's there, and you get back to the office, you can, copy and paste them wherever you need to. But, technology is advancing, so it's helping us write our appraisals a little bit more efficiently, and at least, gives us our, the data we need a lot more, a lot quicker. So we're getting there from the commercial side. I feel like we're kind of still a little bit archaic compared to the residential side, where, they're mostly writing more forms. So not that it's not just checking boxes. I mean, there's a lot of narrative that goes into their appraisal assignments too, but, those forms they're able to they can cook through pretty quick and, get those written a little bit quicker than we can on the commercial side. But anyway, I'm going to let Tom talk a little bit about the residential side and their software and where it's coming, where it's going.
All right, well, I'll use another adage here. The more things change, the more things stay the same. There's a lot of truth to that in appraisal. The fundamentals are still the same in appraisal. The tools have evolved, the technology. In the mid-90s, the advent of digital imaging came on, and that replaced, obviously, traditional photography with film and processing. It was a huge savings for appraisers. Timeliness of reports. We didn't have to wait, hours or day for a photograph. The digital signatures. Boy, when that came on, then things really started to come together with the digital exhibits, and then putting that together with the signatures, and then holy smokes, we could email in different formats our products, and we no longer had to courier or overnight our appraisal reports. And God forbid there was a correction, you'd have to fix it and overnight it again. So, as we all have experienced with technology, with the electronic transmittal of what we do, and with contracts, we see a lot of those that are digitally signed. It's really made the ease of doing business for all of us in many ways a lot better. However, the requirements, the scope of work has just exploded on our end of the business. 15, 20 years ago, a residential appraisal report was about 15 pages. We took 3 pictures generally, the front, rear, and street scene. Oh, and maybe something real good or not so good if we came upon it. But now, those same residential reports are twice that. They're on average about 30 pages with all of the exhibits and requirements and things that we have to do. As probably most of you are aware, we have to take a photograph of every interior room of a property that we appraise now. We have to take 4 exterior photographs, all 4 sides. Used to be we could take nice angular opposing shots and still get all 4 sides of the property in. That ain't good enough for the lender now. They want 4 separate photos, and they want the street scene looking both ways. Because there was some bad actors out there that would fail to mention that that BP station that direction versus something nice the other way. So everything we do is about proving and demonstrating through exhibits what we're articulating and stating in the report. Nobody trusts anybody anymore, and we have to emphatically prove what we're communicating, and in many cases the adjustments that we make in our appraisal reports have to be clearly well supported. And, that's where appraisers try to avoid three-of-a-kind adjustments, all in the same direction, either all up or all down. That makes for a real weak analysis. When you don't have three of a kind, and you have one that's hopefully identical in a given category, and maybe you have one that's up or down, you can clearly prove and demonstrate your point then, because the data cross-checks itself in a scenario like that. So, but anyway, technology has been a curse and a blessing in my view. It's probably kept us all in business, but don't forget, you got to pay for the privilege of that technology, and appraisal fees haven't exactly went up in the last 20 years dramatically. So, like everybody, we're asked to do a lot more for generally less or no more than what we were already getting. So that's my spin on technology.
Well, while you've got the mic, why don't you go ahead and talk to us about the new third-party
Third-party system?
Third-party system, right.
Okay, wow. How much time do I have?
2 minutes and 20 seconds.
Yeah, okay. This isn't obviously a short answer on this. The third-party system, what is that? That's appraisal management companies, AMCs, that you hear a lot of. How many in this room have experienced having to deal with an appraisal that was done by an appraiser that was not from the area that you, geographical competency, which has already been touched on. You ever wonder why that happens? And here's why with this third-party system. AMCs are unregulated. Everybody else in the appraisal management company, they are currently unregulated. Everybody else in the process here, as you've seen, appraisers are highly regulated. You all have to be licensed. Banks and lenders, they are also held to a high standard. The only entity that is currently not regulated are appraisal management companies, and they are charged with the oversight of appraisal management and sourcing the products in many cases. They make up about 80% of the market right now on a national level. AMCs have been around since the early 90s, but it was back in 2008 when Attorney General Como out of New York backed Fannie Mae into an agreement called the HVCC, the Home Valuation Code of Conduct. You may have remember hearing about that in 2008. What that did was it gave AMCs the ability to entice financial institutions to outsource their appraisal management. Most all of the big name brand institutions have since done that and gone that way. In 2010, the Dodd-Frank Financial Reform Act mandated that AMCs have to be regulated, and that's going to be done on a state-by-state basis by the respective division of real estate with Department of Commerce. Since 2009, the Ohio Coalition of Appraisal Professionals that I helped co-found for our state has drafted an AMC legislation to reel in a lot of this these practices that do not represent best practices in our industry. Why do you get those appraisers coming from all parts of the state? Well, AMCs currently broadcast their orders. They dictate the fees. They tell the appraisers what they're going to pay. They still collect. They take many of the fees that the consumer pays for a full appraisal, and they take a portion of that fee from the appraiser. The consumer doesn't in most cases aren't even aware of that. They don't work on a cost-plus model, these AMCs. In other words, charging separately for their services on the good faith statement. That's going to change with the regulation. So they put out assignments, and generally it's the lowest bidders out there that accept them. I'll let you figure the rest out, but obviously that's not a good prescription for winding up with highly credible reports. And the true professional appraisers, in many cases, that are the local appraisers in their respective markets, they're not the lowest bidders, obviously. You get what you pay for, or you don't get what you don't pay for. So that's been the environment for about the last 5 years, and many of you have felt some of the repercussions from that with deals that didn't go through that should have went through probably. That does not add to a fluid real estate market or contribute positively to the recovery of our markets. So that has been recognized, and in 2010, as I mentioned, it's now been mandated to be regulated. Bill and I and others have worked diligently over the last 5 years at working with our superintendent, Ann Pettit, the Division of Real Estate. We're in our 6th draft revision of the AMC legislation. It was introduced this past June. It'll either happen maybe yet this year, certainly next year. It'll take a year or two for this to filter through. And hopefully that will weed out many of the unpleasant situations that you may have experienced. Now, AMCs, there's a lot of good AMCs out there, but like in any industry, there's bad actors. The good AMCs have recognized the reality of this AMC legislation. Many of them already are and have become in compliance, particularly the larger ones that work on a national level. Right now, there's about 38 states that do have AMC regulations, so the handwriting's on the wall to them. It's been mandated, as I mentioned. They know the game's up for them. So there are good AMCs out there that pay customary and reasonable fees to appraisers that actually look for the most credible appraisers as opposed to the opposite. So, how's the third-party system working? I guess it depends what third party you're working through on either side of the business. So, I think that pretty much addresses that issue.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. If you could pass the mic over to Ralph. We want you to answer for us, how can we, being realtors, help you with recovery evaluations when we recognize well above average homes pushing the ceiling of current comparable sales and conditions?
This is typically when you have the best house in the neighborhood, or you have a high house in the neighborhood and no other houses are sold. Some neighborhoods, people build their custom-built houses, low turnover, they build them for their families, next families. When we go out and look at appraisal like that, sometimes I take other pictures of other houses in neighborhoods. See, it's just a low turnover neighborhood. It's very marketable, but they don't turn over. Then you have the over-improvement. New builds especially, I think you can attest to that.
No.
Some builders don't want to add a lot of options right now, where they used to say, let's option all we can. They're afraid to put a whole lot of options on because it may not appraise. Appraisals indicate a neighborhood, price range, and age of a neighborhood, and predominant value and age of said neighborhood. Real estate appraising has certain principles that apply to greater than typical houses in a neighborhood. Our job is to reflect the market. That's all we're supposed to do, is just reflect the market and prove it. Some of the things or the principles you'd have to think about are conformity. Does it conform to its market, neighborhood? How does it, the market relate to this property? I can think of a house on Patricia Drive that just sold. I think John Call sold it this year. Looks like something you've never seen, and the whole rest of the house is split levels, 1 story, 2 story. this is an architect's dream, but professor at Ohio State built it years ago. Very unique property, but not very marketable. Progression is a theory of the lower end is pulled up by the typical. The River Ridge in Arlington, for example, is the lowest price Arlington. You want to get into Arlington, you might get there. That property will be pulled up quicker by the predominant value than the other side of the story is regression. You build the best house in the neighborhood, and it's going to be pulled down, and it won't go up as fast as the typical house. Then you have increasing and decreasing returns. You can keep adding stuff like some neighborhoods, granite countertops are expected. Other neighborhoods, people will like it, but they won't pay any more for it. If you keep adding on to things, sometimes it doesn't increase the value, it just stops at a certain point. Typically, 5-bedroom houses do not sell for more than a 4-bedroom house because a lot of people don't need a 5-bedroom house. If you need a 5-bedroom house, typically you get a pretty good deal, except in maybe large neighborhoods like New Albany where it's common. Substitution is another principle. That is what markets are comparables in other neighborhoods. If I can buy this house here, I can buy it there, you know, they're going to look, what can I do? A lot of times I see people, and I think of a house on Treyview Road. If you drive up and down Treyview Road, it looks like a church. Beautiful home, well built, everything done great. It didn't make what the guy had into the value. And he talked to me and he goes, I'm 5 miles from Arlington. And he answered his question, but I didn't say anything to him. He wasn't in Arlington. I've had a house in Mount Vernon Plaza area that is as nice as any house in German Village. The guy says, this is just like the houses in German Village, but it wasn't German Village. Old Town East has been coming on for 20, 30 years. I hope it comes, but there's still, it talked about in the neighborhoods, you know, you go a few streets over, there's a lot of boarded up houses and there's a lot of crime. Logically, it should come. I remember when I was in college, I thought downtown area hadn't developed. Downtown start to develop. You know, you got above campus, you have Clintonville, Beachwald. It was a natural that Short North would fill in, but it took a long time. I can remember praising a house in Victorian Village for a politician in town, and I couldn't compare it to German Village because it wasn't there at that time. Now it's there and maybe exceeded it. They're very good neighborhoods. So you look for identical houses, you look for what's it like. Is there 10 more houses in this neighborhood that haven't sold? Is this the only one? And we've all come across that. If it's the only one in the neighborhood, they better have a bank where they keep all their money and be friendly with a bank that doesn't sell the loan. You know, they're going to have somebody that keeps us in-house. One neighborhood may be average, the other, it could be the best house in the neighborhood. You have to look at the area. A neighborhood can be like one sentence could be a paragraph. I look at Galbraith Farms, I think it's its own neighborhood in itself. It's big enough, but typically there's boundaries in a neighborhood. They're set by train tracks, they're set by government regulations, they're set by school districts, they're set by traffic patterns. It could be a creek. And sometimes you go to it, well, this neighborhood's just like this neighborhood. I think of Brookside Estates. A lot of times maybe I'll go to Worthington Hills for Brookside Estates. There's some similarities there. That's when I'm struggling. Also, you can tell if an appraiser's struggling if he says this is a unique house. There's just certain things that tip you off that this guy's having troubles with this appraiser, or this person is. Price, value, and cost. Cost does not equal value. The guy may say, I've got $300,000 in it. Okay. If new construction, if cost is equal to or less than value, it's a build situation. Here's the market. Okay, this will sell. If cost is greater than value, you probably should build this house on this property. The best house in an area generally is always a hard appraiser. Appraisers may say it's worth the sales price, while the underwriter may not agree. There's people in this room that I've dealt with that I said it's worth value, the underwriter doesn't agree it. All the major banks right now have hired appraisers out of the business to do reviews. They don't want to take that house back. Fannie Mae may send it back to them and say, we're not accepting this, you got to carry it. They don't want that. Let the appraiser know if there's other similar houses in the neighborhood. Like we said, it may be very low turnover. In that case, I'll explain it's low turnover, but this is a very marketable property. Let the appraiser know if there's multiple offers on the property. We have the hardest time as property values go up quickly and go down quickly. We have to start to make time adjustments. We also have to show that in our reports, and we're dealing with data that's happening. So this is when there's multiple offers. I had a house in Arlington in the Lane Northam area this year. It had a bath and a half. It would normally not sell. It was the only property listed in that area. It sold quick. And how is the demand and supply in the neighborhood? Is it good? Is it bad? Tell us what you think. When I call up and I say, do you have any comparable sales? I'm trying to put the horse in front of the cart, because I can't talk to you after this loan goes through. I'm saying, help me. I need help. Am I missing something? Why is this house worth this much? I can't say that to you because you say, is he crazy? It's a great house. But if I call you up and say, typically if an appraiser calls and says he needs help with comparable sales, he's out of town and doesn't know what's going on, or he's struggling. So that's a tip. If I call you and I say, you have any comparable sales? I might say, I'm having a little trouble with the value. That's what I'm saying. Talk to me now, because later we have to do it in writing. Your complaint has to go to the bank. The bank's complaint of you has to come to me. I have to send it back to the bank. I'm trying to avoid that situation. But when you have the best house in the neighborhood, unless there's a lot of houses in there, it's going to be a harder appraisal. We all know it. I've driven down streets before and I go, please don't be that house. It always is.
Great job. Thank you. Your turn.
I'm just going to kind of wrap this up quickly because the time's getting short, and I think folks want to ask some questions. So,
There you go.
just to expand a little bit of what some of what Ralph said, when you're in a hot market and the prices are appreciating rapidly. I mentioned this earlier, but there's a couple of markets that come to mind. Grandview in the last couple of years has just been phenomenal, and there's been times when I'm getting an appraisal with a purchase price that is $20,000 over the list price, and that has never, and I've been in this business a long time, I had never seen that happen before. And so immediately, when I called for the appointment, as Tom mentioned, yeah, you go through centralized showing. Yes, I did. Okay, that's what it said. And then I called the realtor and said, I need to know what's going on, or it's going to be dead on arrival, because I'm looking at my comparables and they're not, here. The point is it had multiple offers. It sold in a matter of hours, and I needed to apply time adjustments. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I don't remember the specific case exactly. I think it didn't quite make the actual purchase price, but the lender was fighting me on it, and I was trying to convince them, hey, I've got this is what the realtor's telling me, but there is a limit to what we can do as far as time adjustments. If you go over a certain percentage and so forth, they just don't want to hear it. The underwriters don't want to hear it. And so, you may be convinced that market is that hot, but trying to get someone to loan their money on it that's another, case. So basically, just if you get in those kind of situations, give the appraiser all the facts and let them know what the circumstances were. Our job is to produce a credible report and justify that value estimate that the lender can rely on it. And there's times when it is just really difficult to do in rapidly appreciating markets.
Fantastic. And we are actually on time. So now we're in the segment of our forum where we're going to open up the floor for some questions from the audience so that we can get some good answers in. If I could have you come to the front. Well, actually, let me try and get to you so the guys can keep their microphone. Will that work? Okay, as long as everybody can hear you.
My question has to do with providing the appraisers the facts and information on the more improved properties, because there are quite a few occurring in the marketplace. I have submitted a list of improvements to an appraiser with the cost of the improvement. I've been told that you don't want to see the dollar value on that type of exhibit. Is that true or false?
Speaking from my own personal opinion, the more information, the better. It's perfectly fine to, if the owner has made $100,000 of improvements in the last 3 or 4 years, and those are itemized out and so forth, that's wonderful. However, as Ralph said, cost doesn't equal value. We all know there's a remodel and home remodel guide that's in surveys that are put out both by the National Association of Realtors, by various trade magazines and so forth, websites that document these things. I have people that have called me up and said, hey, I'm thinking about putting in a $20,000 in-ground pool in my backyard. What's that going to get me back? Well, if you're living over on South Hague Avenue, I'm going to tell them that's an expensive, well, it's an expensive toilet to put your money down, okay? But if you're up in Powell on a 5-acre site in an established estate neighborhood, you may very well get 50, 75% back on your investment. When we're remodeling kitchens and so forth in Upper Arlington and Bexley and some of the older neighborhoods where the homes are becoming dated, you may get 100%. Now, it's got to be well done, and it's got to be at a reasonable contract price, a contractor you're working with, and when they have to move walls and things, it sometimes the price per square foot goes through the roof. But to answer your question, the more information, the better. It doesn't mean that it's going to translate dollar for dollar on the appraisal, but not putting down the cost is there's no reason not to.
Okay, great. I think I had another question towards the back there. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, my question is, I had a situation recently on a fee simple townhome, and all of you guys are great. I did have a guy from Howard, Ohio, and so that was a problem in and of itself. I never heard of Howard, so I didn't know how this guy was going to deal with us. But in any event, one of the problems was, of course, there had not been any sales because the market had been declining. It was just starting to appreciate, as a lot of the neighborhoods are doing now. And as a result, the only sales they had were the brand new construction. Those had been down as well because the builders had reduced their price, et cetera. So to make a long story short, we got the appraisal cut by $11,000. My sellers and my buyers somehow made it all happen. My seller took less, the buyer paid more. And then what happened was they set the new value. Now all the sales in that same complex are up to where my sellers and buyers had to compromise. I guess my question is, how do you prevent your sellers and buyers from being the determining factor of the appreciation? You see what I'm saying? Like, you're saying you use 3 comps, but if there isn't 3 comps, then the buyer and the seller are stuck having to set the new value. And then once the new value is set, then it kind of goes on a little person from there. Is there anything we can do?
Well, a buyer can pay whatever they want to pay as long as they have a open checkbook or deep pockets. Ultimately, it's the market. It's not the individual appraiser. It's the market that reacts. And in a specific situation like that, you saw what happened. Assuming that was a good appraisal, it did not. The market did not support the pending offer, and that left, one thing to happen: renegotiate. And more times than not, hopefully that does occur. And today's sales become tomorrow's comps, and that's exactly what occurred there. There's not really a good way to prevent that when the data doesn't exist in the first place. Yeah, but you got to remember, new construction in most cases aren't market tested because they're brand new. Resales of existing homes are. New construction typically leads the way, but when you compare a new build against an existing home, How old was that property you had?
Probably about 5 or 6.
Okay, well,
That kind of more.
5 or 6 times the age of a brand new home, and with a brand new home, the buyer has the ability to pick all the options and colors and making an extension of whatever they want, as opposed to accepting somebody else's choices and dreams. So an existing home is always going to be at a disadvantage against the new build, and the new builds then are going to be at the top of the market in that situation. So, it is what it is.
Okay. Let me take a question from this side of the room, towards the front.
I'm just curious, you talked about time adjustments, and we do this when we're doing our CMAs all the time. We're making time adjustments when the market is changing, particularly like the last year and a half. So a lot of times, each new sale is a little higher. And I'm just trying to understand how you all quantify your time adjustments. Are there rules or regulations with regards to that? Is there a formula you use? Because I've had appraisers say, well, I can't forecast, I can't do this, I can only work with the comps that are on the that are out there. So I'm just curious, what kind of time adjustments you make and how do you quantify?
Yeah, there is distinct methodology for time adjustments. In fact, a lot of appraisers do employee relocation assignments where we do forecast and anticipate sales prices. It's different than market value. But to get back to your question, in this environment, how do we arrive at that? First of all, you want to recognize that appreciation does not occur equally throughout the 12 months of the season in this locale. We're in a region where obviously the sales season is what drives appreciation. And, that's historically, pick a month, March or April through September is when you're in prime time. And that's where the true rates of appreciation occur. So, if you just try to straight line and annualize and extract rates of appreciation, that's sometimes a little misleading. The other thing that's important to recognize is not the date that it's sold, a property, but the date of the contract, when the handshake took place. A lot of times that's 30 days, or if it's a new build, maybe 3 to 4 months before the recorded date. That's actually when when you're trying to extract a time adjustment through data, that you got to dig a little deeper and get more of the facts straight so that you can have an accurate adjustment. The way that an appraiser, aside from historical data, can cross-check and validate that, because we have to prove it to the underwriter. We got to make them a believer so they'll sign off on what we're doing, is through contingents and pendings and actives. We can compare those against our closed comparable sales, particularly in hot markets like Bill referenced, where we were seeing 7 to 15% rates of appreciation in a given cycle. That's shocking for this part of the country. I believe we generally see about 3% on average across the board. But when those statistics are thrown out, they can be misapplied, because if you're in a certain location, it may not be 3% positive, it could be the other way. So, everybody likes to try to use statistics, but that's the whole point of the exercise of an appraisal, is to get at that given property's value. And hopefully I've answered your question on the rates of appreciation. Does that make sense to you?
It's not what I was looking for, but.
Well, let me see if someone else might be able to get to it.
I appraised one in Arlington this year, and I go, my goodness, this is 10% higher than I really thought it was going to be. I try not to think that, but it was. And the owner said the same thing. I said, I know. Here's the sales. Sometimes, you know, they won't believe time adjustments, so sometimes it's quite obvious. The most recent sale sold for higher. I have the right to go to the higher end of the range. Sometimes it's not the most recent sale, it's the highest, but I can go to the high end of the range saying that this is a very active market. And this is shown in the appraisal report. They may say there's been 30 sales and there's 3 listings. The MC form also does that. So we have some leniency, and a lot of times maybe I'll get it as close as I can because I know it's a market and I'll have to work out if it's a little different. But also sometimes it's on the underwriter's back. I'll say it's making, the underwriter may say it doesn't make, or they may say, I want 5 more comparable sales. Maybe once every 2 years I have to say, that's all there is. I recommend you have a reviewer do this. I can't find anything else. I think it's worth it. But we can go to the high end of the range, we can go to the low end of the range. If a house needs a lot of repairs, I may say, I'm correlating to the low end of the range. They're usually a range, you'd hope the range is within 10 to 15%. It'd be nice if it was in 5%. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but we do have fluctuation there. And we can make time adjustments, like he said, from the meeting of the minds. When the market first takes off, as she said, it's very hard. We're using historical data. We can also look and say, well, there's 10 houses in this neighborhood in contract. We have to call. Typically, we don't find out what the in-contract price is. Sometimes they go, well, you tell me if it's close or if it's over, and they will. But you have to beg for that.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Gentleman in the back. Would you stand up, please, so that we can all hear you?
When you're buying like a repossessed home, 2 questions. One is a realtor, say I have a home that's been repoed. What do you want prepared ahead of time before you walk into the home? I know I had some recent situation where the realtor didn't have things done and it delayed everything. And second of all, once you get inside, say the furnace doesn't work, but the guy buying it understands that certain things aren't working. When you call for an inspection, you're like, I'm going to tear the thing out in the first place. I really don't care. And then that becomes a problem.
That's when a lender will probably not lend on the property. They want, they'll have to be a cash buyer. They want a house that has an operating furnace. They want a roof that doesn't leak. They don't want to have to take this property back and have to put a furnace in to sell it. Typically, in that case, you have a cash buyer, they'll fix it up, then they'll refinance it, or they'll have some investors. This is just my opinion. Used to be banks would give line of credits out left and right, but that's not so anymore. So you're going to have to mortgage another piece of property to buy that piece of property, or you're going to have cash in most instances, or have investors or a bank who's very favorable to you. You have a lot of money there. You might have to pledge your money that you have for the loan.
And the other part, as a listing agent for a bank that's a property that's been repoed, how do you want us to set the stage? I know we found out you had to have all the utilities on and all the other.
Some places want us to take pictures of water running and a light on. They don't believe us anymore. It's going to the ridiculous again.
So do you go through anything and any, just so you're mentally clicking things off on our side?
Right. Well, it's a hard, most banks will not take it. It's not a lendable property. It's a property that an investor is going to buy, or someone's going to buy and live in themselves and make it better. I don't know of any lenders, unless you have them in your pocket, you do this with them and you have all your money with them, that would lend on that. We're going to look, is it decent, safe, and sanitary? You got to have an operating furnace, you got to have water, you got to have sewer. It has to be a sound property or near sound. If I'm in German Village and the basement leaks, I expect it, but I wouldn't in a new home.
If the air conditioners are working, you don't care about that?
The air conditioner's not working, and he says, I'm going to replace it. I'm going to say, at the time of inspection, the AC was not working, and we're appraising this if it did not have an air conditioner. And I won't give credit for the air conditioner.
Okay. I think there was a comment from Buffy.
Yeah, I did have a comment. I think everybody had commented. This gentleman was the first person to raise his hand for a question.
I'm sorry.
He's been so patient and so just his nice.
Please, my apologies, my apologies.
Yeah, you know what, I wanted to ask you guys, okay, I've been doing BPOs, my gosh.
Please stand up. Please stand up.
Have you heard of broker price opinions?
Right.
You have, okay. The reason why I'm asking that question of you is that now I do 70 or 80 a month, okay? Thousands, okay? Financial institutions, banks are asking me for my opinion. They want a snapshot of what's happening right now, okay? I do it quickly, and I get my fee. They're happy, I'm happy. I've done thousands, never had one rejected yet, okay? But me being a licensed realtor, a broker, owning a company, okay, I've always been very, very concerned about whether we are competing with you people in a manner that is not, I hate to say this word, not legal, but there was a time, I think, that the appraisers were really on the BPO, broker price opinion companies and so forth, for that very reason. And so if you could just say a few words, do I understand, are you concerned about the competition? And it might be justified because you guys are 60s and 70s and 80s, and you've got the people doing broker price opinions.
Well, all right. Well, in the interest of time, I'll just quickly. Broker price opinions have a place. They're typically used for when a lender needs a snapshot valuation of the property at a certain point in time, but they are not allowed by Dodd-Frank or in other regulations to be used for loan origination purposes. So when someone's going to purchase a home, it is not permitted by federal law to use a BPO. Yeah, they are competition, but they serve a purpose in the marketplace. We're not here to dictate that. That's not us. It's for the market to tell us what they need us for. So.
Okay. All right, and we are actually at the end of our time that we had allotted. We just had some parting comments, and I'll just kind of read through this slide and ask you to be patient with me just a moment more. Appraisals are a vital part of the real estate transaction. I think we've learned today that being proactive and communicating early helps all involved, using those best practices. Please, please give our panelists a round of applause and yourselves as well for participating in this forum. Thank you very much and have a great and productive day.